Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And in today's podcast, we are talking about becoming a certified financial planner with somebody who has just very recently passed his CISI Level 7 assessment and become a CFP professional. And that is Matt Taylor, who is a certified financial planner at Key Financial Planning. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Jackie. You okay?
I am. Thank you. Are you?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Sounds nice when you say certified financial planner. So.
It does, doesn't it? Got a nice little ring to it. So, thanks very much for joining us today. We are going to talk about your journey to become a CFP in a minute and all the kind of ups and downs along the way to share with our listeners. But before we get into all of that, I want to start at the very beginning. Could you just give us a little potted whirlwind history about how you got into the financial planning profession?
Yeah, so I started in financial services in 2014, where I worked for Lloyds Bank as a mortgage advisor on the telephone. Was there for a couple of years, did my CMAP qualifications, and then got frustrated with various things. So left and went to an independent, well, they were a intrinsic financial planning company. So it was part of a network. Did my LIBF level 4 qualifications with the Quilter Financial Advisor School, qualified in 2019, and then have been advising ever since with various companies in the last probably 2.5 years with what you would call sort of a true financial planning firm using cash flow software, financial plans and things like that, rather than just looking at valuations and managing investments.
And how did you come across the CFP and why did you decide to embark upon it now?
I first came across it at a Next Gen Planners Conference in Liverpool. I went there with a colleague of mine, and there was a stand for the CISI, and I'd done my LIBF level 4, knew I wanted to do further qualifications, but wasn't sure what avenue. I knew there had to be some further tests to do my CII. But then the CISI were basically saying, well, yes, you're fine with the level 4 with the LIBF, but you have to do the level 6 with us and then on to the level 7. I'd never heard of that there was a level 7. So I thought, well, why not go straight for the highest qualification you can? But then I also spoke to various other people that have done and sat the CFP case study. So my boss, Lee, had recently done it when I joined the firm, and he was waxing lyrical about how good it was. So I decided to just do it for that reason, really, because it was the highest qualification globally, but also I think it's the most transferable compared to other qualifications that are a little bit more technical.
Yeah. So in for a penny then.
Yeah, you might as well go straight for the big one, mightn't you?
Yes, absolutely. All or nothing. And so you sat, what path did you sit then? You sat the CISI level 6 exam, did you?
Yes. So I sat the level 6 CISI exam in September 23. And then I did the level 7 case study straight after. In the meantime, I decided to do my level 6 with the LIBF anyway, because I thought, well, I'm back into exams. I might as well do as much as I can. So I've been doing them this year as well at the same time as my CFP, which probably wasn't a good idea. But so I just did the level 6 for CISI to allow me to then do my CFP.
Carry straight on. Yeah. So tell us what happened when you got your case study. How did you approach it?
The first time, because I did it first time and unfortunately failed, and then spoke to yourself. But the first time,
Come on then, confession time.
yes, I approached it in hindsight terribly. I probably didn't give it enough respect. I was incredibly overwhelmed by the whole process. I remember getting the email and looking at the different things and thinking, oh, this won't be too bad. And then you start to look into it and you think, oh, yeah, there's loads of work to be done here. So I used foolishly, all the way through this, you'll see that I understand the mistakes I made, but I used cash flow modeling software initially because I thought, well, that's what I do day to day. We do financial plans. How hard can it be?
You're not the only person who thinks that.
No. I listened to another one, I think, with Alistair, and he said, while I was doing my CFP, and he was pretty much saying exactly like my journey. And I thought, oh, well, at least I'm not the only one.
No.
And basically, I found that there was some huge failures because of the internal assumptions that they use, the system uses, that you can't sort of break through. So I then tried to doctor it and spent lots of time making sort of individual entries per year. So working out the tax, and that way the output was okay. I probably got to roughly where the financial plan should have been for the client, but the appendix and the report and the plan, didn't give enough detail. So the examiner couldn't see, or the marker couldn't see where I'd gone wrong or where I'd got my figures from. So that was sort of how I approached it the first time. And then the second time, so right towards the end of the 10 weeks, I had a bit of a crisis. And I think, well, we spoke on the phone, and you basically said, put it in, see what happens, because you sort of get those marks for your second attempt, but you really need to spend all this time whilst it's being marked, reworking it, because, clearly you feel like you're not where you need to be, which I did. But basically there was a property ownership in my case study that I hadn't probably explored enough. And when I started to look into it, it was like this big ball of yarn, and there was a little bit sticking out. And when I pulled it, the whole plan went to pot, basically. So I thought, well, I should enlist the help of somebody. Knowing yourself from LinkedIn conversations, Next Gen Planners, I went onto your course, and it was much plainer sailing than it was the first time, because you put those foundations in place and approach it in a methodical manner.
Yes, I think that's it. When you first look at the case study, I think even I can just about remember when I did mine, a really long time ago now, but you look at the case study and you think, actually, it doesn't look that complicated, does it? And you think, yeah, this looks fine. There's nothing more than I would normally do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, maybe there's 4 objectives where on a day-to-day, in reality, I might do 1 or 2 for a client. But other than that, it doesn't really look, it hasn't got nightmare written all over it, has it? Until, like you say, you pull that end of the yarn and then it all starts to unravel underneath you and you think, yikes.
Yeah, totally. I think I had this sort of impression that I'd get this case study and it would have complex tax calculations and, offshore investments, all the things that you maybe think that you will deal with on a day-to-day basis. So when I got the case study, which was just an employed gentleman, and a lady, and I thought, well, this looks pretty easy. He's employed. It got lots of disposable income, or say they have. It looks like it's going to be quite an easy plan. It's just about what contributions do they need for their retirement. It's only when you start to dig into it, and I think we'll likely come on to it, how it improves you as an advisor. That's what it does. It makes you think outside of the box of the sort of investable assets and look at their situation as a whole, and how you can structure things better, which I probably didn't do with my case study.
So were there specific, once you kind of got on the right path with submission 2 and joined a course, were there specific areas that you struggled with?
I think, in both sort of submissions. The second time less so, but the assumptions I think are a much more important part than I ever expected them to be. You get one page with sort of 5 little assumptions on and some percentages, but they are, the center of your entire plan, really. So, and there's so many other assumptions that aren't included. And they need to be, talking to yourself, they need to be back tested. They need to be, well, as the CIS says, reasoned and reasonable. And you need to look forward. And that took a lot more time than I ever assumed, gave it credit for and assumed it would. So the only way I sort of overcame that was by using your method and the podcast you did with Chris Wicks, where he talks about, you don't almost want to be too conservative with your assumptions, because that can as be detrimental as, saying you'll get 20% return. So that was the first thing that I think I found challenging that I didn't expect. Yeah.
There's a lot of thinking that needs to go on with that bit, isn't there, in particular?
Yes. Yeah. I think throughout the whole case study, I the one thing I took away, other than various, the main thing was, don't rush. You need to get the foundations. It's cringe that it sounds a little bit like financial planning, but you need to get the foundations in place, because there's no point running ahead to start, well, what do they need to put into pensions, or, how do they need to invest? If your assumptions aren't right, then you will come unstuck.
Yes, because you end up at a different place than you were expecting. And I quite commonly see people trying to, like you say, jump ahead, think about the recommendations, and then try and make their spreadsheets show what they've decided are going to be the recommendations. But that you just come unstuck again, don't you?
Yes, yeah. So you and I, the last time I'd really done any piece of work of this sort of stature was my dissertation at university, and you would plan it, and then you would say, for example, do plan the introduction and then write the introduction, and then you could leave that, and then you would sort of piece it all together, put it all into a Word document, and send off your essay. You can't do that here. You almost don't want to touch the plan until all the calculations are correct, because you then have to go back in and change things, and if you do, it can throw things out. So you want to I found treating it as two completely separate things helps.
Yes. So numbers first, and then the numbers say what the numbers say, and you make recommendations. And then, because when you're delving about in the numbers, you're finding out where the clients have difficulty, and things that maybe hadn't struck you, on the surface when you first read the client case study, that actually they kind of pop out, your numerous balls of yarn, putting on different threads, that they pop out, don't they? And you kind of think, oh, actually, I need to make an assumption about that, or I need to make sure that when I get to writing up the plan, I tell the client about something else.
Yes, I think that's the other thing that I found difficult or challenging, was that sort of conflicting objectives area. So in real life, if you were doing a plan and you had something to discuss with a client, or you had a conflicting objective, you could just pick up the phone, have a Zoom or a Teams, and just say, this is where we are, tell me a little bit more, that's not achievable, blah, blah, blah. But you can't do that in this scenario. So you have to stand by your convictions and make recommendations. I remember one thing that you said to me early on is, don't say you could do this or you could do that. You have to say, this is what I recommend. So by doing that, it gives you some clarity, but also it does mean that you have to be spot on with your numbers and things, because you are making that, you can't hide behind, well, you could have done this and you could have done this. It's like, you should do this, because that's what we are as financial planners. It's, putting pathways in place.
We're not giving options to a client. I mean, that's what they pay us for, isn't it? That's the thing at the end of the day. So, you are going to run into problems and conflicts between different objectives from time to time. But at the end of the day, you're the expert, and you're the one who, is armed with you have the knowledge of the potential downsides. The client doesn't know what they don't know, do they? So that's where the difficulty comes, I think. And I think, as a profession, there is a big tendency to lay out a number of options when we're discussing financial plans with clients and say, oh, well, you could do this, or you could do that. But the number of conversations I've had when I was advising back in the day about, well, Jackie, what am I paying you for? I'm paying you to tell me what you think, because you know all the intricacies of, I could make a decision, but actually I can't appreciate everything right to the nth degree, where you will have that knowledge, so you can help me make that decision.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's about, well, making recommendations, isn't it? That's what that's what we do. We based on what the client tells us, we make those recommendations. So that's something that I find more challenging was that switch from being able to maybe just speak to the client in a little bit more detail, rather than the information you're armed with, making recommendations on that and standing by those convictions.
Yes, it is a tough call, isn't it? And so you concentrated on your numbers, and then once the numbers told you what you're going to recommend, how long did it take you to kind of write up the whole plan? I guess it was kind of, numbers taking up the majority of the time. But people tell me that some people say, it takes about 9 hours to write up. Somebody else said to me the other day, it took them about 30 hours to write up. So do you have a feel of how long that took you to write up once you knew where you were going with it?
Yeah, so I was sort of fortunate in that, because I'd already done it once. There's nothing fortunate about doing it twice, but because I'd done it once, I did have a body of a plan. So things like large elements of the introduction, outlining the client objectives, that was already done, just copy and paste across. But I did have to, the 4 elements, so, your retirement planning, your protection, estate planning and things, I had to write those out from scratch, or I chose to write those out from scratch, because I tried to sort of copy and paste bits, but it just was getting all a bit complex. I would probably say it took me, I didn't do it in 2 full days because I don't have the concentration for that, but I would say that it probably took me, I'm going to be political here, between the two, so I would say about 15 hours probably. It took me less than 2 full days, I would say, to 2 full working days. So maybe between 12 to 15 hours to write up the plan.
I think also when you're doing a second submission, that sometimes it can be really helpful to set aside those technical areas, like you were saying, the estate planning, school fees and so forth, and write them afresh, because if you're drawing in too much information from the plan, the first submission that failed, you can actually accidentally add in mistakes or slight anomalies in your conversation, which kind of then, when the assessor's looking at it in the cold light of day, they kind of read it and go, hang on a minute. The candidate started to contradict themselves here.
Yes. Yeah. Completely agree. It was, and I followed a very specific process in terms of the recommendation. Which was, all part of your course, but it didn't. My previous plan didn't flow with that process for each recommendation. So actually, I found myself thinking, "Oh, I could put this in," but then, as you say, you contradict yourself. It doesn't flow, and then you find yourself spending more time rereading things, when actually, like any essay or report or plan or whatever, when you just get into a mode of typing and your brain sort of goes into that overdrive thing, you find yourself putting down a lot more information than spending time copy and pasting. So I distinctly put it into 2 sections: the introduction and the bit about the client and the assumptions and how we got to various assumptions. I sort of copied across, but actually from that point it was all fresh. So I probably say less than a couple of days, which was a shock to me, because I thought that would take the most amount of time, to get 60 pages worth of work into a Word document.
Yes, it's funny how it works out, isn't it? And also, I guess, quite unnerving while you're going through the process of the course, because you're kind of thinking, I haven't really written anything yet, Jackie. What on earth's going on?
Yeah, I sort of said to myself before I started the course that I would trust the process completely. I have a tendency to, I don't know if it's a male thing, think I know best. And so think, well, Jackie's course says to do 4 days on this, but I could do this. And actually I said, don't do that, because there's clearly a reason why you failed, you fool. So let's trust the process, trust the course, which is clearly very successful. So I even when I was thinking, we've not even touched the Word document yet, and we're sort of 80% through the course process, but then it all comes together very nicely. You have a check-in with you at the end, and it works. And I didn't ever feel on my second submission that I wouldn't pass, which sounds a bit big-headed, but
Well, you kind of did that bit on the first submission, so
yeah, thanks. But no, so I'd already done that, and actually, when you realise how much work I put in hours-wise, I probably put in the same amount of work first submission and second, but the quality of those hours is polar opposite. So I knew that if I was roughly 3/4 of the way there on my first submission, by doing it with yourself, I was sure to pass, and if not, I'd done something hugely wrong. But
yes, or just made a mistake somewhere. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Turned out I hadn't, but I was confident because of the way that the course is constructed.
Oh, that's great to hear. And so you did pass on your second submission, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so looking back at the overall process, do you have a flavour of how long it took you to do each of those submissions? You said that you'd roughly devoted a similar amount of time to each. How long did it take you to do each of the submissions?
Yeah, I think the first attempt, I think I probably spent all in all about 150 hours, I would think. I spent quite a bit of time, most weekends on it. I was spending a couple of hours before work every day on it and things like that. But then on the second attempt, I broke it down slightly differently, whereby I blocked out the 4 days initially to complete the calculations, the 4 or 5 days, but I blocked specific time out, so it was more concentrated. But I'd probably say I spent another 100 on the second attempt, maybe even more. So, to say you spent nearly 300 hours on something is scary, isn't it? But I think so. I think if I look back at how long I spent, particularly that first time, I remember I spent a lot of time in my home office just staring at a computer screen. So
wow, gosh. And so anyway, it's all behind you now. So the trauma is over, Matt. But tell me a little bit about since passing and learning the different ways, or my version, if you like, of approaching a financial plan for a client. Just a little bit about how it's changed your thought process when you're giving advice to real clients now.
I think the biggest thing, and I touched on it earlier, is financial planning isn't just about investments and investment returns. That's secondary. You need them to underpin any financial plan, which comes back to the assumptions. But what makes up somebody's financial planning journey is the person as a whole, their situation as a whole. So their assets, the ownership of those assets, the tax implications of doing one thing, over another. It's easy to say, well, just change the ownership of the house, but what's the implications of that? What's the benefits of that? State benefits, so things that you don't even probably think of day to day. If somebody passes, bereavement allowance and things like that. So it challenges your thought process on every area, not just I look after this client, they've got 200,000 in a pension. You're looking at the client as a whole. You are doing financial planning rather than advice. So it's challenged me to be more to be much more interested in the person as a whole rather than just what yielding assets they've got to get to their end goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really great to hear. Do you find that on the back of that, as you are, I guess you're kind of more engaged in listening to their stories, when you're meeting with them, does that mean that as a natural consequence, you're finding that you're either spending longer in client meetings or asking more questions as well on the back of that?
Yeah, I think it's not just come since passing. Obviously, it's since I started. So this last year, I feel like I've really improved as an advisor all round. Really, you just listen to people more, don't you? Understand more of what they want to achieve, and that, as you say, you spend longer in meetings, you spend longer with people. But I find that the relationships I've got with clients now are much sort of deeper and stronger than maybe they were before. So clients I speak to them much more about things, and you remember much more because they open up to you rather than just sort of a bit of a transactional relationship that can occur sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think when a client is in that situation, that they feel valued and feel heard and understood by the person who's trying to help them. So I think from the other side of the fence, I'm sure that your clients feel much more, have a much more enriched relationship with you because of that, which I think is fantastic to hear.
Yeah, I truly hope so, and I've certainly had better conversations with clients about their goals and objectives than I ever did before. I was doing some of it because in the companies you work with, you surround yourself with other advisors that, both my two bosses have been CFP, so they have gone through the process. So when you're with them, you get it, but it's only until you do it that you truly realise, how it does change you as an advisor, and it can only be good for the profession.
Absolutely. And I think we did say that at the time, isn't there? There's no easy cut through. There's this maze that you're going through, and you've got to go straight through to get to the middle and then out through the other side. And, lots of people think, I could cut a few corners or spend a little less time. But actually, one of the themes that runs right through every single person that I've interviewed on this podcast is that there's no get out, is there? You've got to put those hours in. And it always seems to be, 150 hours per submission.
Yeah, totally agree. So it's like with anything, isn't it? Some people and it's been a frustration of mine in exams at school and university, they would not revise, and then they just get in. Conveniently, the questions would be what they, knew and they were comfortable with, and then they'd pass, and you'd think, how have you done that? I've been in the library for, the last
months.
week and a half doing all-nighters, and you just have been out last night and come and pass. You would never do that with this because it's not designed. You cannot cut corners. You cannot only put in half the time, because you will get a half cut effort, if that makes sense. The time, yes, can you be, maybe if you're better at spreadsheets or you're better at certain elements, you could maybe cut down a few hours. But even experienced financial planners and advisors fail. So clearly it is about putting the effort in. You cannot sort of cheat it. You have to just put the hours in, make the effort. It takes over most of your life, but
It does.
It's certainly worth it, because when I, look at on LinkedIn now, as sad as it sounds, and I see somebody CFP, I think, fair play. Particularly when I just failed, I was like, fair play. You've worked hard to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Matt, we are nearly at the end of our interview today already, but it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you so far. And I have one final question for you.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to those people who are starting their journey to become a CFP professional today?
So I've touched on a couple of these, and then I'll chuck one in. So I would say the first one which I think we've touched on, is take time on the foundations of your plan. And that is the assumptions, that is the calculations. Don't open Word to do any report or, any plan or anything until you are 100% happy with every assumption, that you've back tested it, forward tested it, checked it, and that you're happy with every calculation you've done, because ultimately that's, you have to be happy with those, because that will then allow you to flow the report nicely. So that would be my first one, would be take time on those foundations. My second one would be, which maybe isn't just about the CFP, it's about starting on their journey to be a CFP, but it would be just be a bit of a sponge. So, observe people, read things. They take the mick out of me at work because I'm constantly emailing at the weekend. Oh, I've just read this article, and they're like, you can switch off. That's a bit weird that you're reading financial planning articles on a Saturday afternoon. But you have to. Everything helps, and it might be just for you to go, oh, that does, that's not something that interests me, or I don't agree with that. But it shapes the conversations you can have with clients. So be a sponge, in every aspect. And then the third one, and you didn't pay me to say this, I promise, is to get some help, because I'd have failed again if it wasn't for the help I got, I think, because whilst I did get 44%, I think it was, on my first attempt, I was miles off it. And as I said, I described it as that ball of yarn. Pulling the little thread created more problems, and actually going back to basics with you and really focusing on the calculations, the spreadsheets and all that. One, it gives you an incredible sense of pride when you look back and think, wow, I did those spreadsheets. But also, you're a great sounding board. You check things with, you can't tell, because ultimately you're not the one marking it and you don't know what we're putting at the end, but you can use your expertise to help. Particularly with spreadsheets, you're a bit of a whiz with those. So.
Allegedly. Thanks very much. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Congratulations once again, and thanks very much for joining us to share your journey to become a CFP professional.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for all your help.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their certified financial planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.